There's this moment that happens when you finally cross into financial security. Maybe you check your investment account and realize the balance has more zeros than you ever imagined. Or you do the math and understand you could survive comfortably for years without working. And your first instinct, the one that feels almost overwhelming, is to tell someone, to share it, to have someone acknowledge what you've accomplished. And that instinct makes sense. We're social creatures. We want recognition. We want the people who doubted us to see that we made it. We want our friends to know we're not struggling anymore. We want our family to stop worrying. But here's what I've learned after watching people build wealth and then watching some of them lose it in ways that had nothing to do with market crashes or bad investments. The moment you broadcast your financial success is often the moment your relationship with money and with the people around you begins to deteriorate in ways you won't even notice until the damage is done. My name's Anderson, and I've spent years studying not just how people build wealth, but how they protect it. And one of the most consistent patterns I've observed is this. The people who preserve and grow their wealth over decades are often the ones you'd never suspect have money in the first place. Meanwhile, the people who looked wealthy 5 years ago are frequently the ones quietly struggling now, trapped by the image they created and can't afford to maintain. So let me show you why silence about money isn't paranoia or antisocial behavior, it's strategy. It's protection. It's one of the most powerful wealth preservation tools you'll ever have access to, and most people give it away without realizing what they're losing. Here's what most people believe about wealth. They think the whole point of having money is to enjoy the recognition that comes with it, to drive the car that turns heads, to live in the neighborhood that impresses people, to post the vacation photos that generate envy. They think wealth is meant to be visible, that if you're not showing it, you're somehow wasting it or denying yourself the rewards you've earned. But that belief is backwards. And it's expensive, because once you understand what visibility actually costs, not in dollars, but in freedom, in relationships, in peace of mind, you realize that broadcasting wealth is trading the substance for the appearance, trading the real thing for a performance of the real thing. The wealthy figured this out a long time ago. That's why you see billionaires wearing the same outfit every day, or driving 20-year-old cars, or living in houses that wouldn't look out of place in any middle-class suburb. Not because they're cheap, because they understand that the moment people know you have money, everything changes, and most of those changes work against you. This is the invisible threshold that most people never recognize. It's not about having money. It's about having money without the complications that come from other people knowing you have it. And those complications aren't minor. They're relationship-destroying, wealth-eroding, stress-inducing forces that you invite into your life the moment you make your financial status public. So, let me show you what actually happens psychologically when people know you have money, because this is where most people's intuitions are completely wrong. You think, if I show people I'm successful, they'll respect me more, they'll treat me better, they'll see me as someone who's made it. What actually happens? They recalibrate every interaction through the lens of your financial status, and that recalibration is almost never in your favor. Your friends start assuming you'll cover drinks, not explicitly, not in a way you can even call out, but suddenly when the check comes, there's this pause, this expectation. You're the one with money, so obviously it makes sense for you to pay, right? Your family members start mentioning financial struggles more often, not asking directly, but making sure you know about the medical bill they can't quite cover, or the car repair that's stretching their budget, or the opportunity they'd pursue if only they had a little capital. Your coworkers start treating you differently. Maybe they're more deferential, which feels good for about 5 minutes until you realize they've stopped being honest with you. Or maybe they're more resentful, making comments about how nice it must be to not worry about money, as if your financial security fell from the sky rather than resulting from years of decisions they weren't willing to make. Every interaction becomes contaminated by this asymmetry. And the exhausting part? You can never be sure what's genuine anymore. That person who wants to be friends, do they actually like you? Or are they networking? That family member who suddenly wants to spend more time together, are they reconnecting? Or are they positioning themselves for a future request? This uncertainty is corrosive. It doesn't just affect your relationships, it affects your ability to trust your own judgment about people. You start second guessing every interaction, wondering about motives, building walls that wouldn't need to exist if you just kept quiet about your finances in the first place. Now, let me show you what this looks like in terms of actual financial cost, because the relationship issues are just the beginning. When service providers know you have money, prices change. Not obviously, not in a way you can prove. But suddenly that contractor who was going to charge $8,000 for the renovation thinks maybe it should be $12,000 after seeing your address. That mechanic who would have suggested the $200 fix now recommends the $800 premium service because you probably want the best. Financial advisors see you coming and steer you toward high-fee products that generate massive commissions while underperforming. Salespeople suddenly have exclusive opportunities that require immediate decisions and substantial capital. Everyone with something to sell develops a sixth sense for identifying people with money, and once they identify you, the prices adjust accordingly. But here's the more insidious cost. Lifestyle inflation becomes almost unavoidable once you've made your wealth public, because now you have to maintain the image you created. You bought the expensive car to show success. Now you need the clothes that match the car, and the watch that matches the clothes, and the house that makes sense for someone who drives that car and wears those clothes, and the vacations that you can document to prove you're living the life that car suggests you're living. Every visible status symbol creates pressure for supporting status symbols. And before you realize what's happening, you're spending 3 times what you used to spend, not because these things genuinely improve your life, but because you're trapped in a performance you created for other people's benefit. Meanwhile, the person who kept quiet about their wealth is still driving their paid-off Toyota, living in their modest house, wearing clothes that work rather than clothes that impress. And their net worth is growing twice as fast as yours because they're not bleeding money to maintain an image. Over 10 years, this difference compounds into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over 20 years, it's millions. You didn't lose money to bad investments. You lost it to visibility. Here's what changes when you keep your wealth private, and this is where the real benefits start becoming clear. You get to form genuine relationships based on who you are rather than what you have. When someone befriends you not knowing your financial status, you have something rare and valuable: certainty that they actually like you. There's no secondary agenda, no calculation about what you might provide, just authentic connection. You get honest prices for services because providers have no reason to inflate costs. You're just another customer, which means you get treated like every other customer instead of being seen as an opportunity for premium pricing. You get to make career and life decisions based purely on whether they serve your interests rather than whether they maintain your image. You can take a lower paying job that's more fulfilling without anyone questioning whether you're struggling. You can live in a smaller place while building wealth without anyone assuming you're failing financially. But here's the deeper transformation. You stop performing. You stop spending mental energy maintaining an image. You stop making financial decisions based on how they'll look to others. And that mental bandwidth, that freedom from constant performance, is worth more than any amount of recognition, because here's what nobody tells you about broadcasting wealth: it's exhausting. You become a curator of your own life, constantly managing perceptions, making sure everything visible aligns with the image you've created. It's like being a celebrity, except you're doing it voluntarily and paying for the privilege. The person who keeps their wealth private gets to just live. No performance, no curation, no stress about maintaining appearances. Just the quiet confidence that comes from actual security rather than the appearance of it. Now, let me show you what this looks like in practice, because the principle is simple, but the execution requires understanding some specific scenarios. You cross $1 million in net worth. Your instinct is to celebrate visibly, upgrade your car, move to a better neighborhood, start traveling first class. These feel like rewards for your discipline and success. But here's what's actually happening. You're converting liquid, growing wealth into depreciating assets and recurring expensive habits. That car upgrade from $30,000 to $70,000 didn't just cost you $40,000. It cost you the $200,000 that money would have become over 20 years. That move to the expensive neighborhood didn't just increase your housing costs by $1,500 monthly, it increased them permanently, creating $90,000 in additional costs over 5 years, plus the opportunity cost of what that money could have earned invested. Every visible upgrade is a permanent increase in your cost structure, and because people now see these markers of wealth, they expect you to maintain them. You can't downgrade without everyone assuming something went wrong financially. You've locked yourself into expenses that work directly against the wealth accumulation that got you here. The person who keeps quiet faces none of these pressures. They can maintain the same modest lifestyle they had at $100,000 in net worth even after they cross $5 million, and that gap between what they earn and what they spend is where wealth actually gets built. Here's another angle that most people miss. When people know you have money, you become a target not just for obvious scams, but for sophisticated wealth extraction that doesn't feel like theft. Family members develop emergencies that require loans that somehow never get repaid. Friends want to start businesses together where you provide the capital and they provide the expertise. People you haven't spoken to in years suddenly remember how close you used to be and wonder if you'd like to invest in their opportunity. None of these people see themselves as taking advantage of you. They genuinely believe they're offering you good opportunities or that helping family is what you're supposed to do. But the pattern is always the same. Your capital flows out and very little flows back. And you can't say no without seeming selfish, because everyone knows you have money, so declining to help feels like a moral failure rather than a financial decision. You end up saying yes to things you shouldn't, purely to avoid being seen as the rich person who won't help others. The person who keeps their wealth private never faces these requests. They can be selectively generous when it genuinely makes sense, rather than constantly defending themselves against people who believe your money creates obligations. Let me show you what career dynamics look like when you keep your wealth private, because this is where the advantages become even more pronounced. When nobody knows you have money, you can take career risks that look insane to observers. You can leave a high-paying corporate job to pursue something meaningful. You can start a business in a field you're passionate about. You can take a year off to develop skills or travel or figure out what you actually want. From the outside, these look like bold moves or possibly reckless decisions. From your perspective, they're calculated risks backed by substantial capital that nobody knows exists. And here's what's interesting. This freedom often leads to better career outcomes because you're making decisions from possibility rather than necessity. You're not taking opportunities because you need the money. You're taking them because they align with your actual interests and long-term goals. Meanwhile, the person who broadcasted their wealth is trapped. They can't take pay cuts without everyone wondering what went wrong. They can't downshift without looking like they failed. They have to maintain not just their lifestyle, but their career trajectory, because both are now public and subject to judgment. You're operating from freedom. They're operating from fear of perception. And over a decade, that distinction creates completely different life paths. Now, here's the warning that most people need to hear. Keeping your wealth private isn't the same as never enjoying it, but the enjoyment looks different than what most people expect. You're not living in deprivation. You're living in intentionality. You're spending money on things that genuinely improve your life rather than things that improve how your life looks to others. Maybe that's taking a month off work to spend uninterrupted time with family. Maybe it's funding education that develops skills you care about. Maybe it's creating margin in your life by working less because you don't need every paycheck. None of these require anyone else to know you have money. In fact, they work better when people don't know, because there's no performance aspect. You're not documenting these things for social media. You're not explaining your choices to curious friends. You're just quietly living well. This is what actual wealth looks like. Not possessions that impress strangers, not experiences curated for an audience. Just the freedom to design your days around what matters to you rather than around what's expected of someone at your income level. And here's the final piece that ties everything together. Wealth you've built quietly is wealth you can lose quietly if necessary. Markets crash, businesses fail, health crises destroy savings. Life is unpredictable, and financial situations can change faster than anyone expects. If you've been broadcasting your wealth, everyone knows when it disappears. Your struggle becomes public. Your stress becomes a spectacle. Every downgrade is noticed and discussed. You don't just deal with the financial loss, you deal with the social humiliation of everyone watching you fail. But if nobody knew you had money in the first place, nobody notices when circumstances change, you can navigate challenges privately, make difficult decisions without an audience, rebuild without having to explain or justify to people who don't understand and don't need to know. This protection, this ability to navigate both success and setback privately, might be the most valuable benefit of all. Because wealth isn't permanent, but dignity can be if you don't give it away through unnecessary disclosure. So here's where we are. Building wealth is hard, protecting wealth is harder, and one of the most effective protection strategies costs nothing and requires nothing except discipline, keeping your mouth shut. Most people will ignore this advice. They'll build some wealth and immediately broadcast it because the recognition feels too good to resist. They'll upgrade their cars and their houses and their lifestyles, creating visible markers of success for an audience that doesn't care about them nearly as much as they imagine. And they'll spend the next 20 years trapped by those decisions, bleeding money to maintain images, managing relationships that became transactional, wondering why building wealth felt easier than keeping it. But some people, maybe you will actually get this. You'll understand that visibility has a cost that far exceeds any benefit, that genuine security feels better than performed success, that the freedom to live authentically is worth more than any amount of external validation. And 20 years from now, when you're making decisions from genuine abundance while most of your peers are still trapped by appearances, you'll look back on this moment, the moment when you understood that wealth isn't meant to be seen, it's meant to be felt, quietly, privately, powerfully. You'll be grateful you kept quiet, not because you were hiding anything, but because you understood that some advantages are too valuable to give away for something as meaningless as recognition from people whose opinions don't matter and whose lives you're not living. The wealthy stay wealthy by staying invisible. The people who looked wealthy 5 years ago are often broke now, destroyed by the image they couldn't afford to maintain. You get to choose which path you're on, but once you make that choice public, once you broadcast your status, that choice becomes permanent. The performance never ends. The pressure never stops. The complications never resolve. Keep quiet, build wealth, live well, let everyone else exhaust themselves performing success while you enjoy the actual thing. That's the difference. That's always been the difference. And now you know why.